he built his home right where that Fidelity building is. His name was Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, of African and French descent. He had a very successful farm and trading post here, all done with the assistance of his Potawatomi wife, Kitty Howard. Today, du Sable is recognized as Chicago's founding citizen, and you will find places commemorating him all around the city, including the first bridge we're going to pass under directly ahead of us. It was renamed the du Sable Bridge in 2010. Now, most of you have a view of the edges of the bridge. You can see the towers that are much very old-fashioned. If you can't quite see it yet, we'll be up there in a minute. So it's obviously much older than 2010. The bridge was completed in 1920, designed by Edward Bennett. Bennett had worked with our most famous architect of the era, Daniel Burnham, on a plan to beautify the whole city of Chicago. It was done in 1909. It was simply called the Plan of Chicago. The idea of the bridge was to transform the right side of the river from old industrial land into a grand commercial boulevard. So the Wrigley Building was the first building to start that transformation and led to what we have today as the Magnificent Mile. Well, the river's pretty peaceful this time of the evening. We're out here on a recreational cruise. Much of its life, this river was industrial. And part of that was because in 1848, they opened a canal to connect the river to the Mississippi River Basin. They did away with that stretch that used to have to carry the boat. So that meant you could ship goods from the East Coast through the Great Lakes in Chicago, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And that made Chicago the busiest port in the country. The river now. At the base of the bridge, in the distance, you see a building with a curved tan front and a little round rotunda up top. Today, this is London House Chicago, a hotel. Well, when it was built in 1923, designed by Alfred Alshore, it was U.S. headquarters for a British insurance company, London Guarantee and Accident Company, hence London House today. Obviously, it's back in that historic style. This is just a couple of years. It was after the first Wrigley building was built. And specifically, this London House style we call the Beaux-Arts style. That's French for fine art, style developed in France in the latter 1800s, and it uses lots of references to ancient Greek and Roman architecture. The rotunda up top could be a little Roman temple, and just below the roofline you see that procession of columns all inspired by Greek columns. Now everybody should have a good view of the short towers on either side of the du Sable Bridge. And keep your eye out on the bridge houses as we sail along. Every bridge looks different. They really make up a rich part of the streetscape down here on the waterfront. Usually a little noisy under the bridge. I'm going to pause, but when we come out, we're going to look at that curved front of London House again, and we'll be looking up at about the 6th floor. So on the curved front, on either side, about 6 floors up, you see the stone carved winged lions. That was the logo of the London Guarantee Company. And then look down at street level. This is more Beaux-Arts influence. This is from the 1909 plan, the curved staircase, fancy railings, the elaborate lighting, all of it to beautify the city. 2-level roadway to get a grand boulevard up top, deliveries underneath. Chicago's city leaders literally said they wanted to turn Chicago into Paris on the prairie. You get to vote if they succeed. I'm going to stay on the left side of the river, and I'm going to stick with one more Beaux-Arts building, but we're going to look all the way down the bend, ahead of the boat for a tower with rotundas halfway up, and a little dome on top of the narrow tower. This is 35 East Blacker Drive, designed by Yaver and Dinkelberg from 1926, so very much the same era as London House. Those rotundas, very ornamental halfway up, but they were actually practical when the building was built. They covered water tanks that were part of the building's fire suppression system. Chicagoans sometimes know this as the Jewelers Building. It was built to attract jewelers to drive straight to their office, not have to take their gems out on the street. Talk about a technological innovation. We're told it was the first high-rise car elevator in the country. All All right, now for most of the tour, I'm going to try to avoid you getting whiplash, jumping back and forth from side to side, but I'm going to take a quick detour over to the right at the two round white towers here. This is Marina City. I'll talk about them on the way back, but you don't get that beautiful view of the two of them side by side when we're returning. So I just don't want you to miss that as we're sailing out. It dates 1962 to 67. So back on the right at water level, and you're already familiar with it because you've been on part of it, is the Chicago Riverwalk, one of our most popular destinations in the city now. It's here because of that old 1909 plan. They envisioned public access to the water, but grand plans take a little while to implement. Plan is 1909, Riverwalk West completed 2014 to 2016. Design made a lot of progress on that account since the 1960s. When I mentioned the Fidelity Building in that modernist style, I said that was a rebellion against looking to the past. Well, it did not take long before there was we know today as the postmodern style. We have a postmodern building ahead of us on the left, the white building with the white stripes and the triangular rooftop. Postmodernism returned to ornament and it returned to historic references, but simplified them or exaggerated them a little bit. So if you look at this white building just on our left now, look at that triangular rooftop. It looks just like the roof of a little Greek temple, lifted improbably high in the sky. And if you look just below the roof line, you'll see the suggestion of columns, as if they were. It's a style we know today as Art Deco. It was popular in the 1920s and 30s. Art Deco skyscrapers have sleek, simple lines, and they love to show off how tall they are. You can see how this building does that. Look below me, windows. Those alternate with the light bands of stone, and so you get vertical stripes, really emphasizing the height of the building. Now, obviously, the tallest part of that building is set back. In the 1920s, developers wanted to build taller and taller up in 1927. It didn't originally have those glass floors on top, so if you look down on it, it's a giant square donut with a big hole in the middle so the interior offices can get their air and light. Let's look two buildings down on the left, looking for a building with two white spikes up the top. This is a postmodern building from 1989. A firm we'll see a few times today, KPF. Look how the top of the building seems to be divided into two towers separated by the glass building. With that, listen to that sound. I'm going to talk about that. And I'm going to wait for it. So with that effect of two towers, spikes, the real caps up there, the top of that building looks like updated versions of the bridge houses that we're seeing down here at river level. And that's another feature of postmodern architecture. It likes to refer to the location it's built. It's called contextual architecture. And in case you think I'm making that up, look back. Same architecture firm, KPF, 1983. This is 333 West Wacker Drive. This put the architecture firm on the map nationally. Everybody loved this building. It's green because our river is green, not only for St. Patrick's Day. Look, there are two tones of green glass and silver bands. Those form horizontal bands that take our eye around the curve of the building that matches the curve of the river right in front of it. Right, this building is totally site-specific. It just would not make sense anywhere else. First two floors, that's stone, not glass. And that's because the building stands right in front of one of the lines of that noisy elevated train we just went under. You can see its yellow trestle off to the right. So normally first and second floors would be expensive real estate. Here the architects actually put the building equipment on the second floor so nobody got stuck with a super noisy office. So we're entering, don't have too much sun in your eyes. There's another curved building directly in front of the boat. This one has an arch cut out at the top. This is River Point from 2017 by Picard Chilton. These buildings built in the last, and as we make the turn, you see there's a corresponding arch at the bottom. The red spiral sculpture is by the world-famous Spanish architect Santiago Calatrava. You can see the building is built on a tan platform with round holes in the side. That's because it stands directly over active train tracks. Those were part of our freight system 100 years ago, and now part of our community. The north branch of the river next. It's become very residential today. Much of its life it was industrial. A couple of signs of that old industry remaining. The raised bridge ahead of us is an old retired railroad bridge. I'll talk about that on our way back. And then on our left, the salmon-colored building is our oldest building on the tour, 1898, designed by Frank Abbott, known today as Fulton House. It was built as a cold storage facility, basically a giant food refrigerator. It wasn't needed anymore in the 1970s, so it got converted to condos in 1981. It took them 6 months to defrost the building, and they needed 500 semi-trailers to cart away the old insulation, including the original horsehair. Then they cut in the windows and the balcony, as you can see on the balconies. 4 private townhomes with views and docks. Reese was a sailor. He very often used triangles in his designs, as you see on the roof, to evoke the shape of sails. And he wasn't just the architect, he was the developer. He actually owned the land. He envisioned that this could become the kind of residential neighborhood we're going to see today. He didn't live long enough to see all of this, but I'm pretty sure when we're out here, he's looking down on us saying, see, I didn't try it. Well, this next stretch of the river gives us good examples about how uses of the river and attitudes toward it have changed over the decades. The low-lying building on the right is a high-end athletic club that opened up in 1979. So putting a gym here was a sign people were starting to live near downtown. But they sure weren't. The city got serious about letting all of us get access to the water. One of the things they did in 1998 was to say any new development on the river has to be set back far enough so there's room for public access along the water. So this is 4 years after that requirement. Industrial buildings, the red brick building with black balconies hanging off. This was built for a railroad company. Anytime you see balconies on those old buildings nowadays, you can be pretty sure it's become residential. When the economic purpose of a building is shifted like that, architects call that adaptive reuse. So from warehouses to lofts, it's how we're saving many of our great old buildings. And look at the first floor apartments. Lovely private patios. No river walk. This was built in 1995, redeveloped in 95, 3-year valleys. The tower will be a 500-room hotel. That's going to go up about 34 floors. They might be 3/4 of the way there. There will be 3,400 gaming seats, and we're going to get a 3,000-seat performance space activity. You'll see how far along they are. Gambling is highly regulated in Illinois to keep it from becoming corrupt. And so the terms of the facilities of the world's first ever general mail order catalog company that most people don't even remember anymore. It was called Montgomery Ward. Anybody still remember Montgomery Ward? Yeah, there's still a few of us. Aaron Montgomery Ward started the company here in 1872 with one sheet of paper you could order goods from. By 19, ahead of us, the cream-colored building with the black balconies, residential today. This was an administration building that they built in 1930. Being 1930, you'll see some Art Deco influences. Look at the windows, very narrow, much taller than they are wide. Uninterrupted bands of concrete running up to emphasize the height. And then look just above eye level. See those brown panels? Boy, they must get tired of hearing us. That brown panels just above eye level, classic Art Deco ornamentation, abstract geometry, stylized nature. Look closely, there's a butterfly or a dragonfly in the middle of each of those panels. This was converted to condos in 2002, right after the company closed. And look at how they literally had to cut out part of the ground floor to create the required riverfront access. What they moved up here for, though, let's look at the mechanisms here. This is an old 1914 bridge just gotten torn down, can be replaced. You can see some of the structure from this old 100-year-old structure that is going to all get torn out. We'll get a new modern bridge here over the next 2 years. The reason Montgomery Ward moved up here, though, is this next building, the warehouse building, 1908, Schmidt, Martin & Martin. Amazon uses technology in its distribution centers. There's apparently a Universal Horror Unleashed in Las Vegas. Will be the second one. Haunted houses, mazes. I don't know what this means. Theme-related food. I don't know if I want horror food. Anyway, that'll be opening next year, 2027. And then to our right, this used to be a Greyhound bus depot. They have the zoning approved for 5 residential towers there, and the permits for the first one to get started. It'll be about 45 stories tall. The financing is in place, so they'll be breaking ground any day. They're going to be putting 2 pedestrian bridges. That is an island, so to increase access in there for people who are living in there. So we will have about 10,000 people living on these 2 corners in about 15 years. Now these projects are slow. It's the same developer doing both. So they're putting up 9 buildings. First one's getting ready to start. They're not planning to start behind me. They're not planning to start until 2029, and they're projecting to be finished in 2037. So do come back and see how all that turns out over time. Now as we head back, they're doing construction up here every day, so I'm never quite sure what condition things are in. As we pass back where that old bridge has been removed, on the right, if it hasn't been torn out, you will be able to see some of the gears left. These are all movable bridges that lifted up. I'll talk about that later. But some of that mechanism was still sitting here that they hadn't dug up when we get in here. So the company, the architects, the city, the engineers all worked for 12 months, a full year, to try to design that building. And ultimately they concluded there are too many water mains running through this end of the lot to be able to put a foundation down for a 35-story building. So they had to move it to the other end of the lot. Let's see if there's any of this bridge left to take a look at. Oh, they're working for, oh yeah, you can see, if you look closely behind the chain link fence and behind the orange rail, you can see the round gears with the cogs on them that were the mechanisms for raising and lowering the old bridge. That's the same kind of mechanism that's under that first bridge we were under, the DuSable Bridge. Remember, that bridge is 105 years old. These banks were packed with factories and slaughterhouses. And all those businesses were just great for Chicago's economy. That's why the city was growing so fast. But you can be sure they were not good for the water. Every day, industrial waste and animal carcasses were dumped into the river. If that's not bad enough, the city's entire sewage system emptied unfiltered into the river as well. Yeah, lovely, right? So it left us with a foul-smelling, polluted mess nobody wanted to be near. It wasn't just, I don't know, what should I say, revolting? It was actually dangerous because it was contaminated with deadly diseases. The river flowed into Lake Michigan, which is, yes, you guessed it, where the city got its drinking water. Year after year, thousands of people dying of cholera, dysentery, and typhoid. Well, by the 1880s, the city leaders knew if they wanted the city to keep growing, they had to fix the health problem. But there was no water disinfecting technology yet. They're out of Lake Michigan. To get that to happen, they designed an enormous canal, far bigger than that 1848 canal. And here's the simple idea. You make the canal deeper than the natural riverbed. Gravity just pulls water out of Lake Michigan, up the water coming back here. By the end of this decade, there will be an enormous reservoir system completed, so when it rains, the storm water can be held back and cleaned before it gets back into the river. That's the technology used in 2024 for the Summer Olympics in Paris that allowed them to have swimming in the Seine. We had our first swimming competition in 100 years in the Chicago River last fall. The river's clean enough now to be home to more than 60 species of native fish. If we'd gone in other places to build new office buildings over the last 15 years. Well, you have surely noticed all the bridges that the captain warned us about. I mentioned they were movable bridges. They had to be because of all that river traffic. So Chicago has more movable bridges than any other city in the country, and some people say in the world. Amsterdam may have a couple more than we do. It's the type of bridge that tilts like I showed you. It's called a trunnion bascule bridge that tips up from the bank. That's what the railroad bridge we saw looks like in the up position. Bascule is just French for seesaw. Trunnion is the axle it pivots on. So in all that space you saw where it was dug up, there's a camp come up and down so they can come and go from dry dock at the beginning and end of season. So we'll just be coming up on bridge season for any locals or anybody staying in town for a few weeks. Wednesdays and Saturdays we get bridge lift days starting around 9 or 9:30. All of the bridges from the South Branch out to the lake go up. Each bridge is up about 15 minutes up and down. 2.5 hours for the whole thing. Here we are on the railroad bridge, 1908, retired in 2001. But the railroad company still owns the right-of-way, and so transportation rules say they have to lower that bridge one day a year to make it still usable, even though it doesn't go anywhere. I've been under this bridge a lot. I don't think I want to be on it the day they're testing, but what do I know? Those property rights are undoubtedly very valuable. It's no wonder that they want to hang on to them. The city has actually landmarked that bridge. as a reminder of how important the railroads were to the city's history. We mentioned the origins of railroads for this. Mail order catalog company in 1880 made 20 different railroad companies serving the city. All right, we're going to head down the South Branch. It's on a little piece of land that people had said since 1900 was too small to build on. There are train tracks on the back. Now you have to put a river walk on the front. But as the property values escalated, they went to incredible technological lengths to get a building to stand up there. I'll talk about that in a minute. I want to make sure everybody, though, looks back down the main branch of the river and enjoys the view of all those great buildings we sailed by as we were coming out. Beautiful light on that light blue curving tower in the distance. That's the St. Regis, Chicago. We'll talk about that when we go out to the lake. Great view of the curve of 333 West Blackburn. All right, 150 North Riverside. Some people call this a building standing on its tiptoes. You can see it narrows down to a very skinny base. That is all the room they had to put in a foundation. So that stands on 16 enormous concrete columns. Those have to go down. Behind those sloped panels on either side are 18 super strong steel girders. They flare out, they catch the weight of the outside of the building and channel it back to that super strong pillar. So you end up with a building, use it, it's going to completely get torn down and replaced, will look the same, and they're going to ship in the new bridge pre-built on barges and then lift it up into place so you minimize disruption to the L traffic. It's out for pedestrians and cars for 2 years. Building, and yet 3/4 of the land at ground level is still open for public use. A double level river walk on this side, and they included a park for the public on the back. So quite an accomplishment to squeeze all of that in there.
I think that might be my favorite.
Now let's switch sides of the river ahead of the next bridge. We have another glass tower. This one has a sawtooth profile. This is the Bank of America Tower from 2020. Same architecture firm, gets partners. It's by a river walk. So they built the building over the Riverwalk to get as much space as the buildings are notable for structural innovations. That sawtooth profile up above is, again, we're looking at economics there. The lot is not rectangular, it gets wider at the far end, and so the building stays. You can make out the masks of comedy and tragedy, so you get a sense of what's going on in the building. And then the Opera House itself is surrounded by office buildings. It's got the setback design to the tall tower we talked about before. Obviously, the offices made money for the developer, but they were also intended to subsidize the opera company. They were going to use some of that revenue to pay for performances. But 1929 is now. All built directly over train tracks in a complex design between mid-1960s, early 1980s. All 4 buildings by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. You can see the space where the trains run and then the platforms the buildings stand on. The practice behind fireproofing inside. This is an aluminum skin. They pick the color. All those vertical tiny girders, they're not doing any structural work. They're just reminding us of how the building is structured behind it. The windows are tinted to match the same color as the aluminum. So it's obviously not everybody's favorite style of architecture. That's no ordinary reflection. Every window in that 4th building is pinched at the 4 corners, so reflections on it ripple, just the way reflections ripple on the river. And that's a sign we've left behind the ideas of modernism. We're up to the contextual ideas of postmodernism. This is 1983, at the beginning of the postmodern era. The building curves because the river curves up ahead of us. Design, all done by the same firm. This end of the station is where our Amtrak train subway is.
No, it's not.